Hi, guys. Welcome back to You Are Here. I'm your host, Danny, and this is a podcast all about growing up and figuring it out together. And so today we have a very exciting topic that I have been thinking about so much lately. And we're talking about reinvention. But the question that I want to address and expound upon in the time that we have together is um, maybe it's not so much of a question, but um, but I'll frame it like a question. Is reinvention inevitable? And I have been really inspired by a few things in my life to talk about this today, but I hope that this is encouraging and that you get something out of it, even if it's just a friend with you in the middle of a lot of questions. So let's talk about reinvention. I'm sure that word probably makes you think of a few things. It makes me think about pop culture because I love pop culture. It makes me think about Taylor Swift because I love Taylor Swift. Makes me think about Madonna. Makes me think about a lot of people, specifically women, who have always come back to the point of reinvention and how women are typically always having to change to continue to be noticed. Reinvention also reminds me of butterflies. I think metamorphosis and reinvention are kind of synonyms a little bit. And yeah, I think about that process of being hidden away and then coming out in this beautiful thing. Reinvention also makes me think about there's a quote that's lack is the mother, or something like that, lack is the mother of invention or something like that. But essentially it's just the idea that nothing promotes innovation like not having a lot. And so there's a few things that remind me, or that just kind of make my brain start firing when I think of this topic, reinvention. But really what started this spiral in my mind down this rabbit hole is the book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. It is number one, probably my favorite book that I read this year. And I've actually read quite a few books this year. I think I'm in the 20s, maybe. I think I am. I'll check my list later. But yeah, it's my favorite book that I've read this year. It's he was the manager of 11 Madison Park for years, which was rated the number one restaurant in the whole world, and has a few Michelin stars, the whole thing. He was over that restaurant, and the book is essentially his journey through the food service industry and also just through his own life. And it's a little bit like a memoir and also like a leadership book talking about all the things that he implemented when he was managing this place. However, there are going to be spoiler alerts for this book and his story, so sorry if you haven't read it, but maybe this will make you want to read it. Essentially, at the end of the book, you find out that every goal he had set for this place, every dream he had for this place, everything that he wanted to do, he did it. He got to number one. He got the Michelin stars. He got the Olympic medal vibe service team. He got everything. And at the end of it, he had to walk away. And he was also faced with this idea of who will he be after this, that took over his early mid-20s and well into his 40s. He was this guy. And it really made me think, which he doesn't really address directly in the book, but it just brought me to this place of dang, no matter what you do in your life, no matter how successful you are, no matter how much money you get, even when you get everything, you're still faced with the same question of reinvention. Who are you going to be now that this thing that you've always wanted is gone, and now that you're faced, you have to make a hard decision, and that's going to change everything, right? And so it really got me thinking about that. And it just happened, this question also happened to coincide very well with my present life. But I just think that there are so many elements in your life. Maybe you're leaving high school, going into college, and you're faced with that question or that reality of like having to reinvent yourself in a new city or in a new school with new friends. Or maybe you're graduating college, having to reinvent yourself into the workforce now, trying to find jobs and trying to reconnect with old friends, maybe, or just like drop all of them and find new ones. Like you're just faced with reinvention in every stage of your life to somewhat of a degree. Um, and I just think that it's a part of growing up, and it's also a part of um, just growing and being human in general. So I did want to talk about that today. So I want to talk about my experience with reinvention. Um, when I was very young, no, I was like 19, 20. I decided to move across the world to Australia to go to college. I went to Bible school. I went to Bible school over there, and I loved it. I had a great time at Hillsong College. But uh, when I was over there, I was like, this is it for me. Like, I'd always dreamed about doing this when I was younger. I was like, this is exactly where I want to be. I've met all of my people here. There's where my people are. I'm going to marry an Australian. Like, I'm going to just send it and stay here forever. And, well, obviously it did not end up happening because we are reporting live from Dallas, Texas. But what ended up happening was I was there for 2 years. COVID hit, and then I had to come back home. So, that obviously was like a whole situation for the whole world, not just me. But I think even that, like that was none of my business. Like I had no part in doing that. And yet I was faced with the question of reinvention, right? Like I thought I had landed somewhere that was going to be maybe forever. And I would have been so happy being there forever. And yet I was now faced with reinvention. At 22 years old, I had to figure it out. And so I think in that moment, I did move forward with like being sad, obviously, for like a month. Rewatched all of my favorite Disney Channel shows. um, and then I just figured it out. I think obviously throughout this whole thing, there was such a grace, you know, over my family, over me during that season. What ended up happening actually is that my third year of college would have been an internship with someone at church. And during that same year, the church that I go to in Dallas was beginning their internship. And so it kind of just worked out perfectly that this was like a place that I'd always known and like been a part of. And then they were starting their own thing. So I still got my internship, which is just really cool in the way like God works everything out. Even if we are faced with like bad circumstances that are out of our control. And so, yeah, like I think that was awesome. So I still got that experience and everything, but I still think like after that, I had to figure out what to do from that point on. So, yeah, but I just think reinvention and thinking about yourself, thinking about your life, thinking about your priorities, thinking about what matters to you moving forward are all things that this kind of topic or these like shaky kind of moments in life can bring forward. And I think it's just important to reflect on it and to also like obviously spend some time and like absorb the shock of having to make so many or feeling like you have to make so many choices and then move forward with something that hopefully like puts something good and like into the world that you're also passionate about is my hope, right? And I think obviously reinvention looks different. I think for in that book Unreasonable Hospitality, Will Guidara talks about he just ended up now he kind of like consults for restaurants and stuff. So he's still in the same world and he still gets to like help incredible restaurants, which I think is ultimately like what that like lesson taught him at 11 Madison Park. And then for me, like I went to college, I did my internship. I ended up in my little reinvention era, I ended up working at church for like 3 years, and now I'm like in a different place where that is over and like I'm trying to reinvent in a different way, you know? And I think that is also like a different vibe. Like it's just cool. I think, I mean, obviously it, like there's always some fear, some worry or whatever. And whenever you have to make decisions, a lot of them that are like important, obviously. But it is very cool that our lives get to be so elastic in a sense, right? Like we get to stretch and mold and fit and design ourselves to a degree, obviously. Um, and like, I'm not trying to be like weird and spiritual or anything, but I am just saying like there is an element to our life that we do get to choose who we want to be. And I just think that is very empowering when you realize that that there's a grace and there's also like a comfort in that we can choose. And so yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'm also currently in like a phase of reinvention. I think maybe beginning this podcast 2 years ago was a portion of that, and wanting to just find something else. And I think it began as an outlet, and now I think it's a part of my reinvention. Um, but I think it's really interesting, just how funny like my life and this podcast have kind of coincided so well with one another. And even like the people that I'm around and all those things. Um, I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's cool though. Okay, so I wanted to cover 3 things to remember as you reinvent. I feel like this is just important to have some type of little pointers and things that you can hold on to whenever you kind of feel like you're a little bit unstable or you're a little confused in the moment that you find yourself. So the first one is, this happens to everyone. And then I put in parentheses a few times. At the beginning, I talked about women in pop culture that have had to reinvent themselves a lot. And I think like that is obviously a completely different like vibe than regular everyday life. But I still think there is some merit to that. I think obviously in every field, there is some level of you have to kind of bring something new and fresh to the table. And I think just like in life, like you have to bring something new and fresh. And I think sometimes things happen around your life, whether that's like to you or at you or from you, I don't know. And you have to like bring something fresh. I think like even it happens in nature, right? Like the seasons change, all the trees like lose their leaves, they die, they lose their fruit, they lose everything, and then they come back as something bigger and greener and more beautiful in the spring. And it's just kind of like a way of nature. And I think it's also obviously a way of life. We carry pieces of nature within us. And wow, that sounded so hippie. I don't mean it like that. I just mean like we are like everything that happens around us, I do think affects us, right? Like we all get kind of sad when it's rainy, okay? And I think like that's what I'm trying to say. And I do think it is very interesting that that it happens in our life as well, whether that's like just kind of like the job that we find ourselves in, that we have to bring something new to like to an ideas or like to market or whatever. Or if it's school, like we need to plan something different. I don't know. We need to reinvent our image, like stuff like that. I think it's something that is also talked about a lot more now because I think of the internet, because of social media. People are wiping their feeds, starting from scratch. People are changing their bios to be more suspicious. People are removing all of the people. I don't know. You know what I mean? Everyone's just reinventing themselves into something different, into like what they want to project to the world. But I think this kind of reinvention that happens in your life can actually be a lot more deliberate, and also it can be a lot more like meditative to who you want to be as a person, which I think is very cool. Okay, the second one is Uno wild card. And what I mean by that is you pick the color, and you get to choose what you want to do, who you want to be. And like I was talking about earlier, obviously that does come with a lot of questions and a lot of choices, and sometimes you don't have a lot of time to like sit and process them all. But I think if you are afforded the opportunity to like absorb the shock what what you're facing, of all of the decisions you have to make, of what you want to do next, even that can be a huge decision as well. I think you'll be in a good spot. Like, genuinely, I think that when you I'm a very like data driven person. I may like show me the numbers, give me the books, like kind of girl. So I want to see like, whenever things like this happen to me, I go like very introspective, and I like think back on like how I felt at that moment, and I think like this is what I need to do next. These are all the things that people have said that I'm good at. Like I'm gonna like I'll go through everything and then figure it out. But if you're not like that, that's totally cool. If you're more, I have friends that are more like feelings driven. Like they'll just go with like what they feel is like the best move, or like where they feel most settled. And like I can't do that. I wish I could though. But if you're like that, I mean, do that. Like if you have all these decisions in front of you, obviously pray if you do that as well, and like ask for wisdom. But again, like you have so much potential, and like I truly believe in human beings and human capability, and there's so much potential within all of us. But I think sometimes people will forsake the opportunity to grow, to expound upon that potential for the sake of being comfortable, or for the sake of being like secure, or like things like that. And I think what that just creates is a lot of people with like stunted I think it just creates stunted people in so many ways. And I don't think comfortability, like, I mean, just a practical one, like comfortability doesn't grow your muscles. Comfortability doesn't make you healthier. Comfortability doesn't do those things. You have to like do hard things in order to get great things. I heard it said recently that like hard things, easy things don't bring a lot of value. And usually it's the hard things that bring a lot of value. Something like that. And it sucks, but it's true. Okay, and then the last one is the only guarantee in life is death. And then I put in parentheses, life is unpredictable, so live it. That's it. And I think, I mean, not to get like morbid, but yeah, everything in your life is subject to change. Everything in your life is subject to shock you, to disappoint you, to bring you a lot of joy, to bring you sadness, to like just, it's always going to be like that. And you have to decide whether you are going to settle for temporary guarantees, because that's really all that they are, or like invest in yourself, invest in your life, invest in the people around you, invest in things that matter to you, that make you happy, and then figure it out from there. But really, you cannot guarantee anything in life, which is such a horrible thing to hear from someone like me, who loves control and who loves like knowing everything. But I have come to realize that it's do be like that. This whole topic as well reminded me of the quote from William Shakespeare that says, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And I think sometimes like that is really what it is. Like these moments of reinvention is greatness being like handed to you, like thrown into your lap. Like you can do something with that, or you can just not. And that's kind of how I picture it as well. Because sometimes it does feel overwhelming, and it does feel very stressful and like panicky, especially if you like, I'm about to go on a rabbit hole, guys. I'm sorry. But I was thinking about, I heard this amazing thing from a pastor that I know, and she was talking about how women, like in Genesis, okay? We're going back to the Bible, okay? Um in Genesis, when God makes Adam, the first thing Adam sees, like if he came from the dirt, he looks down and he's looking at himself and like coming from the dirt, right? Like he's going like that, okay? Oh, not the choreo on the pod. Okay, so he's doing that, okay? And then Eve came from Adam. So whenever she came to life, she came like from the rib. First thing she sees is Adam, right? And so this pastor basically just made this incredible point that a lot of times women will look to men to find like identity and direction and all those things. And then men will look to themselves to find identity and direction and whatever. And she was just kind of making this point about how like men and women find themselves in this very like unhealthy cycle. And that's just kind of, you know, the pattern. And I think a lot of times, like whenever you're faced, especially as a young person, with this idea of reinvention, the first thing you go to is like one of those vices, right? Like either if for women, it's like, well, get married and then this man will tell you he'll be your visionary, he'll be your leader, he'll be your whatever. And then you get married and you're like, yo, this guy doesn't know anything like me. Dang. And so then you're like stuck trying to figure out. And I say that not because I don't like marriage or don't want to or whatever. I'm not saying that because of that. I believe in it and I think it's amazing. However, I think whenever you are faced with this kind of season and you're faced with like those kind of decisions, to look at someone else and say like, you can provide this for me, is just like a lie from the enemy, right? Like no way can they do that. They're just like you. They're just as broken and just as unpredictable as you are. And they also have every right to pick whatever color they want on their Wild Uno card. You know what I mean? And so I think whenever you find yourself in a position of reinvention, I think holding off on doing something that maybe is familiar to you, comfortable, like I said earlier, is maybe a good idea. I think for men as well, just looking, like reflecting back on like themselves and like, how can I work? How can I look like I'm a winner? How can I look like I'm successful and whatever? Well, then you just become God. And same with women, like we make men our God. And so I think it is just a very like slippery slope. And ultimately, I do think a lot of pain that we tend to like cause each other and also ourselves comes from making decisions too hastily, and also comes from not, like misplaced identity and not knowing where our worth comes from. But I think if you are in a season of reinvention, like maybe the college ones or the high school one that I was mentioning before, I think prioritizing knowing and solidifying that you know who you are, even if it's just like so small and like the tiniest things of just being like, I am good. Like if you just have to say that to yourself every day of like, I am a good person. Like I want to see good in the world. I want to make good in the world. That's it. Like that's what you have to say to yourself. And I feel like that can just do so much for your self-worth, for your identity, for who you are and like who you want to be moving forward. But yeah, I think whenever we start getting other people involved in the journeys that can magnify our brokenness as a good thing, so we can get healing and freedom for it. When we get other people involved into that before they need to be there, I think that can hurt a lot more than it can help, both you and them. But what do I know? Okay? At the end of the day. Anyways, so that was that. That's all I want to talk about today. I want to talk about reinvention. You guys should definitely all read that book, Unreasonable Hospitality. And yeah, I had a great time talking about this. And thanks for joining us. We only have one episode left in this season, which is wild. But it's going to be a great one. So please tune in to the end of the season. Happy reinvention. Happy holidays. It is the holiday season. And yeah, okay. Last notes. Please subscribe. please. I told Derek I'm gonna start I'm gonna start putting like a Insta story every day on the You Are Here thing, and I'm just gonna call out handles that are looking at our content and not following us or subscribed. No, I'm kind of kidding. I will. No, but please subscribe to the podcast. Also leave us a comment. I would love to hear about your process of reinvention. Do you think reinvention is inevitable? Can you avoid it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I'm honestly into avoiding it if possible. And please follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Spotify, please follow the podcast. Leave us a review, 5 stars there. Apple Podcast, you know what to do. Follow us. And follow the Instagram, youarehere.pod. And you can follow my personal at Danielle Gutierrez. And I think that's it. Guys, next season's going to be awesome. I'm really excited for it. I have a lot of ideas. Well, that's all I have. Thank you so much for tuning in at youarehere.pod. See you later.